Good morning, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great, thank you. I will give it 1 minute. I see a couple of people coming in, and then we'll get started. Good morning. For those of you who are here already, you can get out your Chumash. We're going to be doing some work in Megillat Ruth, but if you also have a Chumash, that'll be very helpful. So keep it handy. And I'll give it another 30 seconds and we'll get started.
Hi, Vivien. How are you?
Hey, Vic.
Yeah, we miss you.
Hi. Stop that.
Good morning.
We miss you. We miss
Hi,
you. We
Vivien.
miss you.
Who's that? Malka? Are you in Israel, Malka?
All the
I'm
time.
so jealous.
Yes, I am. I know you should be. We are
Enjoy.
practically open now. Thank you. How are you doing? Is everybody
I'm so
okay?
happy. Baruch
Thank
Hashem.
you.
Everybody.
I miss you a lot. I want you to know I've been following you all those months.
I love you too. Thank you. All right, let's get started. Today's class is sponsored by Natalie Dweck in celebration of her granddaughter, Natalie Dweck Schwartz's first birthday. About 120, happy and healthy with a beautiful family. And in loving memory of Natalie's husband, her late husband, Harry S. Dweck, MD, Aharon Ben Altun Vishlomo. I'd also like to dedicate our learning today to the Refuah Shelema of Abraham Ben Yosef Batya, of Shafia Shoshana Bat Sarah, and Shelomo Ben Rivka. Hashem should send them health, speedy, and they should be vibrant and live long, happy, productive lives. Okay, so today we're coming in for a landing. There's only 2 more classes. I had a little heart attack when I looked at the calendar and I saw that in 2 weeks is Shavuot. So I realized that we better really, I better get my act together. So today I'd like to try and complete chapter 3 so that next week we could complete chapter 4 and thereby do the entire, oh shucks, I know she's trying to get into the class. Hold on 1 second. Gail, are you trying to get into the class? No, it's a different number. I'll give it to you quickly. I know. Okay, I'm in the middle of the class, so let me give you the number quickly. Sorry, guys. Do you have a pen? It's 721-982-5272. That's the code to get in. Did you need a dial-in number or is that enough? Jessica, do you have the dial-in number handy? I'm not sure. She's going to read it to me now.
Hold on.
Oh, did you put it in the box? I don't see it.
I'm giving it. Okay.
Oh, 1 second. I'll give you that number and then we got to get started.
The dial-in number is 929
929. This is the dial-in number, Gail. 929
205
929.
205 6099.
Yes, that's the number. Okay, see you soon. Okay, bye. Okay.
Vivien, make me a co-host so that I could
Oh, we'd love that. How do I do that?
right
Hey, Safra, more?
click on it.
Click on it.
Yeah, more and then hit make co-host.
Make co-host. Got it.
Thank you.
Great. Okay, thank you everybody for your patience. Sorry for all that. You know what? I'll just keep going from here. Anyway, so, oh, thank you, Jessica. So I'm seeing a big glare. All right. So today we're going to do, hopefully cover chapter 3 in Megillat Ruth. And on our way to chapter 3, I'd like to just take a little detour and backtrack to the end of Perek 2 from last week, because that's going to propel our learning for today. So if you could open your Chumashim, I'd like to revisit Pasuk 19 in chapter 2. And this is the part where Ruth comes home and she brings some food from the field that she had gleaned that day. And Naomi is surprised by the bounty that she comes home with. It's about 10 times the amount of food that would normally feed a person for a full day. And she gives a blessing without knowing who her sponsor is. And the blessing is, Yehi Makirech Baruch. Whoever it was that sponsored you, that was so generous with you, that person should be Baruch. That person should be blessed. And then Ruth goes on to say that the person was Boaz. And in verse 19, once Naomi realizes who the sponsor is, her blessing changes. And that's what I want to focus on today. Her blessing changes dramatically because she says, Baruch Hu La Hashem, and she invokes the name of God in the blessing for Boaz. But a lot of things change from one pasuk to the next, and that's what I want you to start to notice for today. So right now, in verse 20, we have Vatomer Naomi, who just one verse earlier was just her mother-in-law, Vatomer Lachamota. She becomes Naomi. And Ruth becomes Kalata, the one who is going to complete her. She has her proper name. Naomi has not had a proper name in the text for quite some time now. And I want to use this as an introduction to chapter 3, which is that Naomi is sort of waking up again. She's once again, her energy is returning to her, so to speak. And I'll speak to that in a minute. But while she recovers her name, and she now has a relationship with her daughter-in-law that she sees her as her kalata, as the one who completes her, she's able to invoke the name of God. She's able to bless Boaz in the name of God. And the next few words that she said, we don't know if she's blessing God or blessing Boaz, but I'll say this: once the gates of blessing open up, once we are able to outpour positive emotions, which Naomi hasn't had all of this time. I should take a minute to show you that when her daughter-in-law magnanimously offers to make herself a pauper and go in the fields and collect food for them, she barely answers with 2 words. She tells her, Lechi biti. She's no longer, and I want to take a minute and talk about Naomi, where she is, as opposed to where Ruth is. Ruth is on the rise. There's no question about it. She's a busy beaver. She's coming, she's going. She has all of this activity about her. And up until now, since they got home back to Bethlehem, Naomi's been, I would like to say, a little bit even in a state of depression. Her name, not because I'm psychoanalyzing her, of course, but because the way the text really doesn't name her and doesn't give her a speaking part, and she's not animated at all. But all of a sudden now, when she hears the name Boaz, everything about her perks up. She starts, and we know in text, when a person says something like Baruch Hu La Hashem, they got back a certain type of an energy and a belief and a spirituality. And in that belief, she says, whether it's Boaz or whether it's God, lo azav chasto, he has not left his chesed, his kindness, his caring, his generosity with the living and with the deceased. Vatomer la Naomi, again, you just said it in the beginning of the verse, Vatomer la Naomi. The verse is telling us that whatever Naomi hasn't spoken in all of this time is now bursting out of her. She's saying it again. We're recording her as being a speaking person here. And then she says, Karov lanu ha'ish mego aleinohu. This man is a very near relative to us. He's actually one of our goels. He's one of our redeemers. And that's what we're going to talk about today. what does it mean to be either a goel or possibly to be nigal? We're going to have both. We're going to have the redeemer and we're going to have the redeemed. And I'd like to see how Torah views this idea of redemption. And the word redemption is going to change very quickly because I had entitled the class A Date with Destiny, because we're going to see that here the redemption is going to be part of a personal destiny, of course, of a national destiny. And there are going to be more destinies that are going to be referenced here that I think are speaking to us today. So with this short introduction, I just want to show you the next few verses, go through chapter 3 so we could feel that we own it, and then go into this analysis of how we view this word destiny. I'm not even going to define it yet, according to Torah values. So just to go through the verses with you quickly, verse 21, what happens to Ruth? Ruth becomes, the minute Naomi, it's like a seesaw, the minute Naomi becomes Naomi and she takes up all this space and she's talking and she's active and she's sort of brought to life again, what happens? Ruth goes back a little bit and she becomes Ruth HaMoaviyah. What do you mean Ruth HaMoaviyah? I thought we did so much work already to have her believe in herself and to have her see who she is. But in this case, I believe that Ruth HaMoaviyah is mentioned this way because she understands perfectly well what Naomi is suggesting. Naomi is suggesting this man Boaz is from our redeemers. Hint, hint, he could possibly save us. He could redeem our fields. We'll be financially spared. He could actually marry you. I mean, there's so much that goes on with being a redeemer, which we'll talk about soon. And she says, Gam ki amar elai. She changes the subject. Imagine in the middle of text, Ruth is saying, yeah, I heard you, Naomi, about him being she sounds like a teenager, which of course she's not. You know, I heard everything you said about him being a goalenu, but you know what? He told me that I could glean whatever I want to glean and I could, you know, have as much as I need to collect. And we're asking ourselves, why is Ruth behaving this way? She was so mature 3 verses ago, and all of a sudden now she sounds like she's retracting a little bit. And I think the reality might be actually scaring Ruth. Sometimes greatness could be scary. Sometimes this idea of stepping outside ourselves and actually accomplishing the great thing that we had in our mind in real life is a little bit scary. We scare ourselves. And so she's sort of retracting a little bit. And Naomi's not having any of this. Her mother-in-law, Naomi, says to Ruth kalata, to Ruth, her daughter-in-law. And there's so many words now, all of a sudden, and this is beautiful to see. When we have relationships like here, when Ruth is down in the dumps, Naomi picks her up. When Naomi's down in the dumps, Ruth picks her up. And it happens to be totally okay. The author is saying they're here to help each other. They're here to support each other. And now that Naomi found her energy, she has enough energy for herself and for Ruth. And she uses words like her kala. She says, Tov biti. She calls her my daughter. And that's what happens in life. Sometimes we need to be carried a little bit. Sometimes we're the mother and we're doing the nursing and the nurturing and the carrying. And sometimes it's okay to let other people step in for us until they bring us back to our vigor, our strength. So this is what's taking place at the end of last week. Now we go into this week. Now Naomi decides that she's going to play matchmaker. She had decided it before, but now she's going to be a little more pushy about it, I would say. And I'll say this too. When a person is depressed, like Naomi was originally, she can't even think for her basic needs. She doesn't realize possibly that she's hungry. You know, Ruth doesn't go out into the field to glean for them until they're practically starving, which means that at that point where Naomi was in chapter 2, that state, she couldn't even create or fathom a strategy for survival, for the basic survivals. But now here that she's all of a sudden had her batteries placed inside of her, Naomi Chamota, she's taking the role of being her mother-in-law, and she says the most beautiful thing. You know, mothers and mother-in-laws, we think we're so subtle and everything, but you'll see how she approaches this idea. Look, all Naomi wants at this point, all any mother wants is to see their children married and happy and on their own and fruitful, and all of that is beautiful. Naomi, this is her daughter-in-law. And so she, you think she has to be a little more careful with the way she broaches it. But what does she say? And now, like I said, now that she found this new energy, she's able to make plans. Because when somebody's depressed, or somebody thinks they're a victim, or somebody is mara, or somebody is dejected or in the dumps, they can't even make plans for the future, not for themselves, not for anybody else. Because depression doesn't allow you to move forward productively. And so what happens, and what was her cure? Maybe we should take 1 second before we didn't really address for 10 seconds, what made the change for Naomi to go from being this victim, not even talking, not even eating, not even caring about anything, to heck with everything, to all of a sudden she's up and energetic and wondering, I'm gonna be a matchmaker, we're gonna do this, we're gonna do that, I'm blessing people all over the place. What brings her to this point? One tiny act of kindness. Because if you look at the verses, really nothing changed except for one thing. Her daughter-in-law came home from gleaning in the fields, and she brought her the other half of her sandwich. That's really what it was. Boaz had given her food, and what happens is she sees that her daughter-in-law saved half of her sandwich to give to her, and that touches her to the core. And sometimes kindness could be a very big cure. Never underestimate that somebody else who, and you wouldn't think that that would be the magic potion that's going to help somebody. We never know what it's going to take to flip that switch. We think that we need the grand gestures sometimes, and we think that we need major intervention. But sometimes something as simple as a kind word, a half of your sandwich, a feeling that I understand your pain, I understand your hunger, I understand your shame. All of these things, just one little tiny twist, and boom, the next verse she comes alive, so to speak, Naomi. And so here in verse 1, she's becoming the matchmaker, and she tells her, BT, my daughter, halo avakesh lach manoach. Maybe I can find you some type of a comfort, asher yitav lach, for your own sake, so it'll be good for you. When she uses the word manoach, which is a beautiful, beautiful word, we should understand, look, she's speaking a little bit, she's tapping the situation. She doesn't want to go full force and say, it's about time you found somebody to marry you. So she uses the word manoach, and I hope you have your chumashim. If you do, I'd like you to go in the blue books to page 36. And if you have a different chumash, it's chapter 8, verse 9. Again, if she's speaking in code to Ruth, then it means that we, the reader, should pick up on these codes, and we should know what it is that Naomi is telling her daughter-in-law. And when she says, I need to find you a manoach, she's saying a mouthful. So in chapter 8, verse 9 in Bereshit, the manoach in that story is, I see you, Malka, shaking your head. It's Noach's little dove. It's just so beautiful. You think that there's no romance and violins. It's all here, because when Noach sends out his dove, velo matzah hayona, the dove could not find manoach lekaf ragla. She can't find a place to rest her little feet. And what does she do? She returns to him, to the teva, because the whole world was filled with water. And what does Noah do? We can't let these little subtleties get lost on us. If Naomi is suggesting that Ruth be like a little dove, you know what she's saying? Since you have nowhere to set your feet down, since right now you're sort of, lost in the wind, that's really what we are. You're like that dove. You're like Noah's dove that's out of sorts, that's out of his league, that's out of his environment and out of his element. And so he needs a place to rest. And just like that little dove had Yonah stretch out his hand and bring the dove to inside the teva, inside a place of safety and security, that's what I want for you, my daughter, says Naomi. I want somebody, if you'll go out there, I understand your situation, and if you're willing to go out there and you're willing to risk putting yourself out there, literally, you will be like that little dove. Somebody's hand will stretch itself out and will bring you in and will show you kindness and will give you exactly what you need, which is a home. And then she says in verse 2, Ve'ata halo Boaz modatanu. She's so, it sounds like she's subtle, but she's so not. And I'll talk about those words in a minute. I'll just finish the verse. She says, that Boaz that you've been hanging out with his maidens, he happens to be winnowing the barley tonight. Hint, hint. The whole thing, every verse you could put in parentheses, hint, hint. She's saying something. But when she says, and again, I believe this is here to tell us that our entire perspective of how we see not just ourselves, but the world could change in 2 words. Because if you go to chapter 2 in Ruth, verse 1, we were introduced to this Boaz. But over there, Naomi had a relative and his name was Boaz. And now here in verse 2, Boaz is our relative. I'll just say, Asta Atzma Ikad. Those Hebrew words mean that here, she made herself the Ikad. For instance, if you bump into somebody very, very famous, would you tell that famous person, hey, you're related to me? Or would you tell that person, let's say you had a very wealthy uncle or something. Would you tell the wealthy uncle, hey, you're related to me? Or would you say, hey, did you know, by the way, I'm related to you? Because the Ikad is that person. Where there's a will, there's a relative. So here, Naomi, has so much, she's just oozing of confidence and she's oozing of positivity. She's saying, Boaz, the one that earlier we were lucky to be in his presence and we were lucky to say, oh, I know him, he's my 3rd cousin twice removed, even though he's not, he's the 1st cousin. But I'm just saying, Naomi has this new sense of confidence where she's saying, Boaz modatanu. Boaz, he's the one that's sort of lucky to be related to us. And now, my dear, this is what I'd like you to do. We still do the same thing today. I want you to shower, wash up, put on a beautiful outfit, blow your hair, get your nails done. It doesn't say that exactly, but I want you to beautify yourself. Why? Because I want you to go down to the garden and I want you to I want you to go covertly. I want you to go on a mission, on a secret mission. And I don't want anybody to see you. And I want you to wait there until he finishes eating and drinking. So we know that this time of year, we know it from Yehuda, it's the same as the sheep shearing time. In times of bounty, where you're collecting all the work that you put in for the year, it was typical for the men to eat, drink, be merry, and possibly be in a mood that they're going to want to satisfy themselves physically as well. If the opportunity would present itself and Ruth would show up, then Naomi is sure that Boaz would sort of take the bait and be interested. And she says it very clearly in verse 4. When he lies down, and you'll scope out the place and see exactly where he's going to go down. You'll come there, Vigilit margelotav, and you will sort of uncover his feet, and you'll sleep there, and then he'll tell you where to go from there. He'll give you the instructions moving forward from there. And of course, there are volumes and volumes written about this. What exactly was she suggesting that her daughter-in-law do? Was, what is uncovering the feet a euphemism for? Of course, I'm sure you're familiar with a lot of the commentaries, but the idea seems to have a hint of seduction over there. I mean, the lying down definitely would say that she was suggesting perhaps that Ruth avail herself to Boaz. And she had said earlier, because he's one of our Goels, he is a redeemer. And now you could just imagine Ruth, she's putting herself in a very precarious position. Because in putting herself out there, what are the options? What if he rejects her? What if he accepts her, but he didn't marry her? I mean, there's a lot of variables. There's a lot of moving parts. I love Naomi, but her plan is a little bit not so airtight over here. But yet Ruth answers in verse 5. She says, everything you tell me, I will do. She goes down to the garden in verse 6, and she does everything that her mother-in-law had said. And in verse 7, when Boaz eats, drinks, and he's merry, he goes to sleep, and it says, Bikse ha'orma, orma, arum, in the place of where there might be some kind of either nakedness or trickery or something. They call that place orma. She comes quietly and she lies down by his feet. Up until now, she's following instructions perfectly. And it happens to be in the middle of the night. The man, Vayecherat, he trembles and he's startled, he's astonished, and he sees, oh my gosh, there's a woman sleeping by my feet. And he asks, Mi'at, who are you? And she answers, and we need to pay attention to her answer. She answers, Anochi Ruth Amatecha, I am Ruth, your maidservant. Uparashta knafecha al amatecha. I would asking for you to spread your wings over your maiden because you are a Goel. So let's go slowly. When he asks the question, mi'at, right away Boaz is turning her from an object, an object of physical pleasure, so to speak, and he's making her a subject. He wants to give her a name. He doesn't want to just engage in an activity just for the sake of the physical pleasures. He's introducing her a little different than the way Yehuda had approached it. He never even asked Tamar her name, or he would have known it was his daughter-in-law. So here, he's engaging her. And what does she do? Ruth is fabulous. She plays her part, especially since she's flying without a script. Naomi just gave her certain instructions, and then after that, you're on your own. She says, Anochi. The word Anochi is self-defining. My Anochi. I know who I am. My I-ness, my sense of self is completely here and in the present accounted for. And I'm going to use my name Ruth. I'm not calling myself Ruth HaMoaviyah. I am Ruth. And then she uses a term of humility, Amatecha. I am your maiden, so to speak. And good for Boaz that he gives her this opportunity to restore her own name and restore her sense of self. And it takes confidence for her to say the next few words. We have to imagine for 10 seconds what's going on through her mind. What is, for her to come out and blurt these words out and say, spread your wings over your maiden, that's marriage. That's take your wings and put them, bring me into your fold, so to speak. That's as delicate a way as she could suggest. And she says, because you are my Goel, because you are a redeemer. Naomi had said, Mi Go'aleinu. But you know what? What Boaz is going to do is the shift of responsibility. When she had first met Boaz, Boaz had said, "You're blessed because you came lachasot tachat kenafav." You came, Ruth, you're blessed because you came to find refuge under the wings of God. And now what Ruth is doing is she's saying, I know, Boaz, that you thought I was coming to find refuge under the wings of God, but now I want to shift the responsibility from God and say, Boaz, I'd like to come and be under your wings, so to speak. And she's saying, she's sort of pleading her case. She said, I'm calling myself Ruth. I don't want to highlight the fact that I am a Moaviyah in this sense. And what Boaz answers, because at this point, everybody's heart stopped beating. If there was a cliffhanger, we would end and say, stay tuned for next week and see how Boaz is going to react to this. And Boaz answers, thank God, we're able to sigh a little sigh of relief. He tells her, Berucha at la Hashem, you are blessed to God, BT, my daughter. Hetavd chastech, this chesed that you're doing is even greater than your original chesed, which was taking care of your mother-in-law or maybe taking care of your husband after he passed. And then he tells us what we're all thinking, because we're not 100% sure. We're just guessing that she's beautiful and young, but he's old and wealthy. And he says it, he gives us a hint and says, I give you credit that you didn't go after the bachurim, the younger ones. In other words, what Boaz has in wealth may not really be compensating for the fact that he's aged, that he's older, and whether they're poor or whether they're rich. And here, when Boaz starts to use these words for her, he's finally getting to the key words of the pasuk that I want you to notice. He tells her in verse 11, don't worry, my daughter. Everything you ask me, I will do for you, because everybody in the gates know that you are an Eshet Chayil. And the reference to Eshet Chayil, we could just do one entire class on how the words of the Eshet Chayil, we believe it was written by King Solomon. It's in the Mishleh. Eshet Chayil is actually a chapter in Mishleh. It's in chapter 31. It doesn't start, so if you go to 31, you don't see it right away. It starts a couple of verses down. And when he references Eshet Chayil, we start to understand when he tells her, like, Hetavd chastech, for instance, when Eshet Chayil will say, Gemalat hu tov. A lot of the language that's used in the Eshet Chayil that many people have accustomed to read on Friday nights, that language and that, if the authorship is King Solomon, then she's his grandma. So it's very possible that it's talking about Ruth herself. Many people say he wrote it about his mother, Bathsheba. Some people say the Eshet Chayil is actually talking about the Shabbat itself. And I'd like to think it's speaking to every woman and her potential. And it is just a reminder. Of course, it's a compliment on Friday night after the work week and after the women did everything they needed to do to get their Friday night tables ready. It's the husband recognizing that effort, but it's also a, if we have time one day to do Eshet Chayil together, we'll see that it encompasses a lot of different avenues. But as far as Ruth is concerned, there are a lot of aspects of Eshet Chayil that directly relate to her. Like, for instance, he tells her, Eshet Chayil at. What is at? What does that word even do there? Well, it's a little bit of a uncomfortable conjugation. At, the word at is made up like aleph to taf. You're an Eshet Chayil, you could say from A to Z, so to speak. But the Eshet Chayil itself is written in an acrostic way. Eshet Chayil Miyimtza Batach Bale Ve'ala Gemalatu Tov. It's written, every verse starts with another letter of the alphabet. And verses like Chagra Be'oz Madneha, she girds her loins, it might say in the English. But the word Be'oz looks like Boaz. Chagra Be'oz Matneha. Vate'amet zeroteha, and she strengthens her seed. So this could be speaking exactly to this point right now. She musters up the courage to go to Boaz so she could establish a future seed for the nation of Israel. And now Boaz says, Ata, ki omnam, I am a Goel, but there is a Goel that's even closer than me. And the 13th verse, he says, do me a favor, stay here tonight, but as soon as the dawn breaks, as soon as morning comes, then we will see if this other person will redeem you. Im yigalech tov. Tov is either good, that'll be nice. If he redeems you, that's great. But Tov could also be the name of his brother. Nachshon ben Aminadav had 4 sons. He had Elimelech, who was Naomi's husband. He had Salmon, who's Boaz's father. He had Naomi's father, and he had this person Tov. So the 4 brothers of Nachshon ben Aminadav, one of them, who's Tov, is still in line to be a redeemer. And good for Boaz that he's not usurping his role. He's giving an opportunity to the person who comes first. And he says, but if he doesn't want to redeem you, don't worry, I will redeem you. And he swears to her. The words Chai Hashem means it's a swearing. He says, just sleep here till the morning. When he says sleep here till the morning, he doesn't mean that he wants to engage in anything physical. He just is chivalrous enough not to have her walking around in the middle of the night where it could be dangerous for a beautiful maiden to be in a field by herself. And so in verse 14, she sleeps by his feet until the morning. She gets up before anybody could recognize, before it's light enough to see anybody's face. And he says, either to himself, we don't know who he's speaking to. He says, let it not be known that this woman came to the garden. He's either defending her honor to himself, maybe he's speaking to God, but at any case, nobody's aware of this little encounter. But before she leaves, he gives her, Vayomer havi hamikpachat, bring me your kerchief or your handkerchief that you have and hold it. And what does he do? He gives her 6 barleys inside of it. And many people wonder, what are the significance of the 6 barleys? So a practical, pragmatic approach could be that if anybody were to spot her scampering around at 4 a.m, what are you doing? At least she's holding barley, and she could say, we're so poor that we had to go out super early to, glean, and here's my gleanings. But it could also be a hint or a sign for Naomi, the mother-in-law, that she would be saying at this point, Seorim sounds like Sha'ad, gates. And maybe he's trying to hint to Naomi, I am going to be going to the gates. What were at the gates? Back then, the judges would sit at the gates, and that's where the elders would come, and they would hold court there, and decisions would be made. And maybe that was sort of a cue for him to say, don't worry, I'm going to handle this matter, but I'm going to handle it judiciously, and I'm going to do it in the proper manner. Give me a minute. And maybe that was one of the hints that he was sending to her. We should also know at this point that Naomi wasn't sure where Boaz stood with all of this, because he knew she came back to town. He said so himself when he meets Ruth for the first time. He said, I heard all about you and I heard what you did with your mother-in-law. So if you know that your cousin, who was once very wealthy, is back in town and now she's so poor that she has to glean in the fields, won't you send her a little basket? Won't you offer her something? And since Boaz hadn't done any of that, Naomi wasn't sure where she stood with this. But now Ruth comes back in verse 16 to her mother-in-law, and her mother-in-law asks her the strangest question. She says, who are you? Mi'at biti. I don't even recognize you. In other words, I have to ask who you are. And Ruth answers her. Now, she, of course, was asking me at BT, possibly, you come home from a date and your mother says, so how was it? Did you have a good time? She really wants to know, if this is going to go further, if there's going to be a second date. What Naomi really wants to know here is not who are you, is she wants to know, are you the future Mrs. Boaz at this point? No, tell me tell me the story. And she answers her right away and she tells her everything that that the man did for her. Doesn't use his name here. And she says, here, I brought you these 6 stalks. He gave them to me. And he said, I don't want you to come empty-handed to your mother-in-law. Meaning these barleys are for your mother-in-law to see. They're actually a message for her. And there we go with that word, like Vayihaliluha Bisharim Ma'aseha. The Sha'arim in the part of the Eshet Chayil speaks to the fact that she will be lauded and praised in the gates. And Boaz had said it earlier, everybody at the gates of the city are talking how you're such a Ba'alat Chesed. Anyway, her mother-in-law tells her, Shivi, sit tight, be patient until we see how the matters will fall, because I know Boaz and he won't stop until he settles this matter. And so this is the introduction for what's about to come, and I'll just give you a little preview. Next week, the word Goel is going to be all over the pages. If you have colored markers, highlighters, and you have your own Humashim and you want to highlight it for next week, that word is just going to boomerang off every single verse. And so our question is, when Naomi says he is our Goel, and this is what today's class is about, we want to have a date with destiny, so to speak, and I'm not sure how we want to translate destiny into Hebrew. If you Google it, it might tell you Godal, which would have a little bit of a sense of things are just haphazard and they're up to luck and they're up to chance. Or maybe mazal, that might be a word that might be used for destiny, where, the world, so to speak, is in control of what happens to you. It doesn't put the control right in your place. I think, and I'd like to learn, and if somebody has a suggestion, I'm open to it, but I think the word yi'ud, which means your purpose, your mission, might be a better translation. Somebody wrote your ultimate potential. Yes, beautiful. So your yi'ud would be your ultimate potential. And so the question is, how do we see this thing called destiny or potential? And Naomi is the first one to suggest that when it comes to potential, the first time she's going to use the word mego'alenuhu, she uses the term Baruch Hu LaHashem. So to be redeemed is going to have, or to be a redeemer, and this story is great because everybody's a redeemer and everybody needs redeeming, and that's why it's so fantastic. It's very reciprocal, this idea of redeeming. We may not realize it at first, but hopefully I'll bring that to light. So you know me, if we really want to know, and Google's not enough to figure out, how does the Torah define this idea of destiny, or this idea of Goel, of redemption, so to speak? The best thing that we could possibly do for ourselves is go to the first place where Goel is mentioned. And so, if you'll please turn in your Humashim, in the blue books, it's page 272. And if you have a different Humash, it is in Bereshit, chapter 48, verse 15. And if you want to sing, you could sing to the top of your lungs. Don't worry, you're all muted anyway. This reference of Goel happens to be one of my favorites. So if you turn to verse 15, we have this, because she had said, Baruch Hu LaHashem. There is a component of beracha, of blessing, with the idea of redemption. And I'll show it to you. So Here Jacob is blessing Joseph, and he says, the God that went before my fathers, before Abraham and Yitzchak, that has been shepherding, a shepherd, a caregiver for me until this day. And then this next verse you're hopefully going to be familiar with, Hamalach hagoel oti mikol ra, yevarech et hane'arim ve'ikare bahem shemi, v'shem avotai Abraham v'Yitzchak, v'yidgu larov bekerev haaretz. I know you all know this verse. A lot of people have a beautiful custom of blessing their children. Some people do it on Friday night. Some people do it whenever they want. But the question here is, what is a goel in this context? In this context, it seems that Jacob is telling his grandsons, so already this idea of a heritage, of a passing down, of an intergenerational component is part of this destiny. And I'll explain it a little more, because the first thing we have to know, according to Yaakov, is there is such a thing as an angel or a guardian angel or something that is guiding and protecting us and sort of driving and moving us forward. I'll explain it a little more. He says the malach, and of course, before he uses the word malach in the previous pasuk, that's why I referenced it, he said, Ha-Elohim asher hitalchu avotai. Don't lose sight of the fact that there is a divine component in the physical world, and that divine component will allow us and help us and guide us, because part of our reaching our ultimate potential is going to require this knowledge. So right here, before we could be redeemed, before, again, the word for redemption doesn't sound like the same word as destiny, but it's going to be, because that's the word goel is the word that everybody's using in the book of Ruth to allow everybody to fulfill their potential. So this word here, what the verse is saying, it's really very beautiful, is that malach that protected me from all evil should bless the children, should bless the next generation. And of course, we can't help but look at the fact that he's saying, Yevarech et hane'arim. We had no idea why Ruth keeps following the ne'arim, and Naomi keeps saying, no, don't follow the ne'arim, follow the ne'arot. And maybe what Ruth was doing, she was following the ne'arim, Ephraim and Menashe, she was following in their footsteps so that she could also be redeemed like they were redeemed. That would make a beautiful sense, not that she's chasing after the young boys, but she's following these ne'arim. In this verse here, they expect, when we hear the word goel, for us to hop into the first goel and see what's taking place there. And what's taking place there is more than just the fact that there are ne'arim that are being blessed and that are being able to channel in the blessings from previous generations. But he says this strange thing that's no longer strange for us. Yaakov says, Vikare bahem shemi. This whole story of Megillat Ruth is lehakim shem. We want to bring people's names back. We want to recapture and reestablish the names of the people, not just here, but as well as our Megillah. And the names that we're recapturing, yes, we're pressing the rewind all the way back to Abraham, to Yitzchak, to Yaakov. Right, Abraham and Yitzchak, he is Yaakov. And then he is my favorite of the whole story. And then he says this strange 4 words, V'yidgu larov bekerev haaretz. You know what it means to fulfill a destiny? Don't think it's just this beautiful, romantic view of accomplishment. No, says Yaakov. V'yidgu larov bekerev haaretz. Yes. Well, the English means that they will proliferate like fish in the center of the land. And there's a lot to be said about that. But first, let's start with this. You're gonna be fish out of water. You're gonna be dagim that are bekerev haaretz. Fish don't survive and don't flourish on land. Everybody knows that. How on earth could this be a beracha? That you be as fish out of water. Who wants a beracha like that? Nobody. I don't want to be fish out of water. But Yaakov is telling us a truth. And he's explaining that sometimes in order to accomplish our destiny, to get to the next place, to get to the next level, what's going to happen? We're going to have to feel a certain discomfort. And in order to combat the discomfort that we're going to feel, if anybody was a fish out of water, I would say it was Ruth herself. She's a Moabite princess in the Judean region. That's pretty fish out of water to me. But you know what the beracha is saying? V'yidgu larov. Even when you're in a place that's totally unnatural for you, where you're not in your comfort zone, when you're in your most uncomfort zone, in that place, says Yaakov, my blessing for you is that you should be able to proliferate even there. And so when we're talking about a Goel, we're talking, yes, she wants to proliferate, she wants to have children. That's what the whole story is about her bringing seed to the world. But it's also telling us, guess what? If you are on your journey to meet your destiny, to fulfill your destiny, then let me tell you, because you have a malach, because you have a guardian angel, and because you have zechut avot, you're a child of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, because of that, you're going to be able to defy the laws of nature. You're going to be able to be like a fish that's proliferating in the middle of the land, out of water. Know this. This is what's so beautiful about Torah. Torah is telling us you are in control, and at the same time you're in control, know that you can control your destiny because there are a lot of forces. You're packing heat. There's so much behind you that's, excuse me, there's so much ammunition behind you. Somebody was asking what pasuk, so I'll just repeat it because it's beautiful. It's verse 16 in chapter 48 in Bereshit. You have so much backing, you have so much support. And so when we first come to understand what the word Goel means, what Naomi is telling Ruth is that the first part of being redeemed is having this knowledge. And know this, that you are now part of our heritage. Once you said, Amech Ami, that my nation is your nation, I don't know if you know all the perks that come with being part of the nation of Bnei Israel. This is part of our heritage. And so this Geulah that we're first referencing, this is going to be what I'd like to call a personal redemption. There are going to be multiple forms of redemption, but the first redemption that has to happen before we could have a national redemption is we need to have a personal redemption. Every person in the nation needs to know and believe wholeheartedly that this is part of our heritage, our inheritance might be even better. And so only with this foundation could we see the next Geulah. And then of course you'll say, this is what Naomi was speaking about all along. This is what our Megillah is all about. This is not just Ruth's personal redemption. This is going to be our second Geulah that appears in Torah, is on page 318 in the blue books. It's Sefer Shemot, chapter 6, verse 6. And this one is famous. Even if you don't have a Chumash in front of you, you'll probably know it by heart. This is where God is taking Bnei Israel out of Egypt. And he says, Vehotzeti etchem, I'm going to take you out from the tortures of Mitzrayim. Vehitzalti etchem, I'm going to save you, spare you from all of your work and hardship. And then our word that we were looking for, Vega'alti etchem bizroa netuya ubishfatim gedolim. And I am going to redeem you. I'm going to allow you to fulfill your destinies. And how am I going to bring that about, says God? When I'm going to take you out, it's not about me, it's about Egypt. I'm going to take you out of Egypt. When I'm going to save you, I'm going to save you from your hard work. But when I'm going to be a Goel, says God, what am I going to do? Remember that little bird that Noah stretched his hand out, that little dove that Noah stretched his hand out to bring in? Well, that's what God is doing here. I'm going to bring you with the Zroa Netuya. I'm going to outstretch my hand, says God, to bring you in. The idea of Geula, of fulfilling destiny. The Torah decided to give God an anthropomorphic element. It's giving God a zroa. It's as if it's giving God a body part. It's giving him an outstretched arm, an outstretched hand. It's as if God is saying, hold my hand. He's stretching his hand out and saying, hold my hand. We'll hold hands together. We will get to the next step together. And in order for you to take that next step, for us, this is a national redemption. We have to really allow ourselves to break free. You know, a lot of people didn't leave Egypt. They say chamushim, only 20% left. Because psychologically speaking, it's very hard to break loose from those things that hold us back. We don't have, sometimes we don't allow ourselves to start the new beginning. We don't give ourselves a license to move forward, to be free, to be happy, to be redeemed. And so God is saying, a person who's in a place that he needs to fulfill his destiny, and he needs to be supported, and he needs to be brought out, even God himself is going to say, I'll give you a hand. I'll help you out. And this speaks to us. If we see a person that's going through a hard time, they need a physical hand. Sometimes people, you know, they need a push. They literally don't underestimate that you need this, sometimes we are on the receiving end, sometimes we're the givers. And that's what happens in Megillat Ruth. Everybody who's a redeemer also needs to be redeemed. Naomi herself needs to be redeemed. She's Mara. And Ruth herself is a Moabiyah. She needs to be redeemed. And Boaz himself actually is going to get his own redemption through redeeming, but that's for next week, God willing. And so I just wanted to give you a couple of, I'm going to give you one more so you get a better picture. So in order for destiny to be fulfilled, we have to know our heritage, know that we are inheritors of this beautiful blessing that Yaakov gave his grandsons. And we have to know that God's standing there with his arms stretched out saying, just hold my hand. Just believe that there is a force that's going to help to carry you to the next stage, to the next place. And the third place where it has, oh my goodness, I didn't realize it's so late, I'll be quick. The third place where we have Gaal, the word Gaal, is on page 378. It's in the book of Shemot, chapter 15, verse 13. And I had to bring you here because it's just too beautiful. I'm sorry if I'm going over a little bit. If anybody has to leave, I won't be offended, but I'll just try and wrap it up quickly. This third place, it says, Nachita bechastecha am zu ga'alta. First of all, with singing the song after the sea had split. Some people say we were even singing the song while we were still in the sea, while we were walking through. But either way, when it says, Nachita bechastecha am zu ga'alta, this nation that you redeemed, Nehalta be'ozecha. Anybody see Nehalta? You guided them, you drove them. Be'ozecha, Boaz. You guided them like Boaz or with Boaz, El neve kochecha, to the place of Kedusha. The same way. I mean, already here it's telling us that Boaz is going to drive and guide Ruth in this pasuk. If you want to superimpose the pesukim, don't worry. Boaz is going to take Ruth to Neve Kochecha, to a place of holiness, to a place of marriage. Of course, here it probably means that God, you're going to take us to your place of holiness, which might be the Beit HaMikdash, which fits in beautifully also because Shlomo HaMelech is going to build the Beit HaMikdash. But the idea of Geula is not just a physical redemption, and it's not just a national redemption. It has a component of a spiritual redemption that is very future oriented. And I'll be quick of the quicks. So go to page 700 because it's this week's parasha, so we can't leave it out. But it happens to be that in chapter 25, verse 25, in Sefer Vayikra, it talks about exactly what's going on in ours. This week's parasha, it's talking about what is being asked for Boaz. If your brother becomes impoverished and has to sell his property, the goel that's closest is going to redeem, is going to be the goel for his brother. So Geulah here now takes another step in terms of important. Geulah is not just something we do personal for an emotional state that a person might be in, or for our national state, or for our spiritual redemption. It has a very practical application. It speaks of land, of family, of physical, financial redemption. Behad is saying, don't think that Goel is this crazy, big, lofty thing that you can't accomplish. It is accomplishable in the most pragmatic way. And last one, I know I keep saying last one, but I can't leave this one out, it's too fun. Go to the book of Bimidbar. I'm on page 886, because I think you'll also appreciate this reference here. And it's the daughters of Selofhad. It's chapter 27 in the book of Bimidbar. You can start looking at it if you wanted to from the beginning, but basically what the daughters of Selofhad want to do is they want to do the same thing we're talking about. They want to restore their father's name on his land so that his name won't be lost and he'll be able to be amongst his brothers. And what does that say for us? Women, it's not just something that Boaz could do with the Sanhedrin at the gates of the city. These women, these daughters of Selofhad, are able to pick themselves up, vatikravna, and they're able to enact this idea of Geula. This idea, they're in fulfilling their destiny, they're actually redeeming their father, and they're redeeming his memory on his land. And I'm sorry, I realized that the clock, as always, ran away with me. So I'd like to say, just to bring this to a conclusion, sometimes when we see a road ahead of us, or we see our future, or we envision our own future, there are always two roads. One is we can say, this is my fate. I can't change this. I can't control this. God destined this, or God deemed this, and we leave ourselves with very, very few options. But when we choose to go down the road of Geula, and we choose to take control of our own destinies, and we recognize that we do play a huge role, and we can do what we were meant to do if we believe in ourselves and we believe in the system. And I believe that's why Naomi said, Baruch Hu LaHashem. The people who want to follow a destiny where they're in the driver's seat and they know that they're driving together with God and with the angels and with the blessings, that it's one big carpool that we're in. If we know that that's our carpool, so to speak, that we're all in it together, we'll have much more confidence and courage to move forward and create our own beautiful endings to our stories. And otherwise, the alternative is not so pretty. The alternative is giving up to fate and just saying, this is my lot, this is my story, there's nothing I can do about it. The nothing I can do about it is the worst thing that we could say, because it's not just you. You're not alone. God has his hand out. It's stretched out. His Zroa Netuya is waiting, and he's saying, just take a couple of more steps and you'll reach my arm and I'll pull you the rest of the way. So my prayer is that we all together reach this beautiful place where we're able to accomplish our greatest potential nationally, personally, spiritually, and in every which way. I thank you for joining today. I love being together with you. I look forward to Thursdays so I could be together with all my beautiful friends.